In his report to the 19th CPC National Congress, General Secretary Xi Jinping said housing is for living in, not for speculation. What signals does his remark send to China's housing market? Developing the housing rental market has become a long-term strategy for China's policymakers. Will a robust rental market reduce the high housing prices in China's big cities? China's central bank, the banking regulator and the housing ministry are jointly working to act against money laundering in the property market. Should China worry about a Minsky moment in its housing sector? Since China launched its housing reform in 1998, the country's property market has experienced rapid development. But high house prices have become a serious problem. What are the major challenges ahead for further housing reform?
China's property market is being closely watched, both at home and abroad, with endless predictions of the bubble bursting. The Chinese government keeps tightening regulations on housing buying to curb speculation while also promoting the rental housing market. Can rental housing help cool down the overheated property market? Will 2018 see a turning point for home prices? And how high a risk is there of the so-called Minsky moment for the housing sector? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Mr. Mao Da-Qing, Deputy Chairman of the China Real Estate Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Mo Tianquan, Board Chairman of Fang.com. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue, gentlemen. First of all, let us know more about the background against which so many policy measures have been rolled out to curb the speculation. First of all, your thoughts, Vincent.
Well, since October last year, the central government, local governments as well, have had a series of tightening policies toward the property market because the price jumped too much in the past 2-3 years. So I think it's necessary to do something to put everything under control. The property demand is very, very strong. That's the fundamental, and the supply is, I think, is not enough to meet the demand. So that's the fundamental. Other than the fundamental things, and there is the financial policies there, and there are actually too much money in the market, and the money needs a place to go. So property market is really the place. The money has been flowing a lot too. And other than stock market, the stock market has been fluctuating, but property market has kept going up. So I think under such kind of situations, from the top leader of Chinese government and to the regulators of the ministerial level regulators, they have been very keen to cool down the property market, and the policies are very, very tough, and the policies have been very effective, in the past almost 1 year.
Now, many observers who follow the 19th National Congress of the CPC were impressed by a warning that Xi Jinping, our president, delivered. He said, the houses, the properties are used for living in, not for speculation. What did he mean by living in instead of speculation? I mean, property market has always been used throughout the whole world as a part of their speculative behavior. But in China, the highest Chinese authorities vow to curb this tendency. Is it possible? Is it a realistic goal?
You can see from a few angles, and I think these members will talk about it. You can see the resident leverage ratio from the end of last year to the first half of this year is from 44.8% to all the way to 47%. And somehow, like in Shenzhen is 148.2% leverage ratio, which is very, very high. And secondly, I think the purchasing power driven is by the so-called exchange rate panic. So actually, the purpose of buying the property, quite a lot of people to buy the property is not really because of I really need the property to live in. I need to keep it for something, as they worry about the money, exchange rate problem, this and that. So So if this kind of things is going on and on, I think going to accumulate a big risk, in the economic.
Are you suggesting clearly that you are talking about the Minsky moment? If you are a little bit too optimistic about the bullish market, then you're going to have a hasty collapse all of a sudden overnight, right?
If they induce gently, like the thing goes on, I think the Minsky moment could be happen sometime. I don't know whether.
Zhou Xiaochuan, our top banker, warned the Chinese of being too optimistic by quoting the Minsky moment. Do you think this is likely to happen?
I think the warning is a real warning. It's a real signal to the markets, to the property market, and to the financial market as well. In the past 2-3 years, in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, big cities, and the property price has been doubled, not only for one city, but all the big cities in China. And other cities also has a very high increase in the past 3 years. And we actually have seen this trend in the past probably 8 to 10 years.
10 years
It's a long time, going up. So I think we need to be very careful in making judgment of what's going to happen following this, strong momentum. But I think the good thing in China's property market is that the leverage level, the down payment is still relatively high comparing to other mature Western, markets like in the U.S. and European markets. You have to put down 30%, on average, to buy your first house, and you have to put probably up to 50 and above 50% to buy your second house. So this high, percentage down payment is a safe harbor for the property market for the time being. But if there are a lot of loopholes there, and some people are trying to get rid of the policies, regulation policies, if the leverage is becoming higher and higher, and if the trend goes on without a fundamental support, the Minsky situation may happen.
And the rental, cannot really cover, and a lot of way are behind, the monthly installment.
Yeah, the rental itself cannot be justified, for the high price of the property.
Yeah.
Look at the banking industry in China. CCB, or China Construction Bank, along with the Bank of China and CITIC Bank, have signed up with some of the property developers on a long-term rental housing and a credit loan package for home renters in Shenzhen and other first-tier cities. The loan can be repaid within years with a credit line of up to 1 million yuan. Is it good news? Is it a blessing for young people? So long as I'm concerned, many employers from the real economy have been concerned about the brain drain because young people cannot afford to buy homes, and if they cannot rent, if they cannot buy the properties, they would rent, but they don't have enough income. So do you think collective rent from the banks would be a way out, would be a very effective approach? For example, some big companies, if they want to keep the most talented professionals there without suffering brain drain, they would pay the banks millions of dollars in a way to help young employees pay the rent. What do you think of this approach?
I think this policy is very attractive to the brain talented people. It started actually with Shenzhen, and I believe that has been very successful, times ago, because Shenzhen, we have seen Shenzhen has booming in the past, 2 years or 3 years. I think one of the things behind it is really Shenzhen's talent policy, attracting people, with a bachelor degree, with a master degree, and a PhD degree. People.
Oh, by the way, the property market in Shenzhen have been crazy, right? With outrageous prices going up and up non-stop.
And then the rental is also keep on going up. When the price of the housing going up, the rental also going up. We can see a very clear signal is a lot of company, technology company, they're starting to move out from Shenzhen to Dongguan, to Foshan. I think it's not very good thing for the key technology city to keeping on the momentum keep the technology, the advantage. So I think government trying to bring all the kind of policy to make the company they can keep the talent and keep the young technology people. I think which is basically I think it's a positive policy for the city. Yeah.
In August, China announced plans to launch pilot programs in 13 major cities, including Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, to build rental housing on rural land. Now, that's pretty interesting for farmers. To what extent can these new rules ease the housing shortage in those first and second tier cities?
I think it's a whole renter policy or renter orientation which was started with the top leader of Chinese government, because the president says the housing is not for speculation, it's for living. But we do not have enough supply, as I started at the beginning of this session. So we need more supply. So the policy you just mentioned, the 13 cities, they are trying to build those houses for renter only. That's to fill the gap of the shortage of supply. With that policy there, with that government-oriented, push up, I think it's going to ease the property market. It's going to cool down a little bit of the property price hike.
I think these 13 cities are the most and the price most sensitive city, the highest price.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and also is this kind of cities is always lacking of land banking from government. So to use the rural land, which is I think is quite a wise way. Yeah.
What do you make of the mindset of the younger generation of possessing the property instead of only enjoy the right of use? Now, young girls who are looking for boyfriends would always say, do you have a property? Because it seems that the property would serve as the deposit to ensure their retirement, life in retirement.
Well, Chinese tradition, owning a property is a safe thing for the whole family and for our whole life. So I believe this tradition is not going to change for the time being and for the near future as well. The renter policy or favorable policies toward the rental properties or toward the building, rental properties, it's really a social, I think, a welfare policy. I think the central government, of course, it's the government's responsibility to make sure all the citizens they have a place to stay. So it's really not a market-oriented policy. The demand is still very, very strong, and the supply is not enough. So that's the fundamental. But of course, the favorable policy toward rental properties is definitely to ease in the short period of time the property market, the price in itself.
Thank you so much. Yeah. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Mao Daqing, Deputy Chairman of the China Real Estate Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Vincent Moten-Chan, Board Chairman of Fang.com. We're discussing why so many policy curbs have been recently introduced to ease the overheating in the housing market. Will the long-term renting market be the way out for the younger generation who live and work in the first-tier cities? Is that the silver lining, silver bullet? Or will that be more of a problem for them to cover the costs of their lifestyle in more prosperous first and second tier cities? We'll be back with more answers and insightful analysis. Stay with us, please. Welcome back, gentlemen. Now, Daqing, what's your take about the general situation here? In the United States, for example, the property market has always been part of the barometer to indicate the health, whether it declines or it picks up, to gauge the economic performance of the U.S. economy. So do you think property market in China has always been a barometer, a hallmark? You have been a property developer for years.
I think for the past 15 years, I think definitely property development generates a very big GDP and contribute a lot in the economic development. And this contribution goes to the city infrastructure development and make a lot of difference in the city construction. I think definitely this shows a lot of positive part of the urban development, but also it increase a lot of risk because in China, I think it's only one simple way for the people, to accumulate their so-called asset and the wealth. The only way is to spend money to buy one unit, to make it. They every day is thinking like the price going on and on, So everybody is praying for the price keeping on going up. Nobody think where is the end. Nobody think which day is the end, So this also pushing the land price going up and up. So everything accumulate together is nobody know what is the ceiling of the price, And also to talking about the leverage ratio is going higher and higher. Every year it's going up, like let's say 10%, 20%. It's very, very fast. So even to the second tier city, somehow is in the past 5 years, second tier city, the resident leverage ratio is even higher than the first tier cities. So actually it shows quite crazy of the
So you do acknowledge there have been bubbles?
There's bubbles. Yes, there's bubbles.
Will the bubbles one day cause systematic financial risks?
If we don't control it, if we really just indulgently, let the thing go on like this way.
What's your analysis about the bubbles bursting one day, causing avalanche, wreaking havoc with the Chinese economy in general?
Well, I'm comparatively confident with China's general economy and also with China's property market.
I'm afraid Professor Zhang Weiying will seriously disagree with you. He's a very famous liberal, outspoken critic of the macroeconomic adjustment policies.
Well, he's probably have his own opinion.
He's a big fan of market economy fundamentalists.
You're right. So as Keynes said, well, in the long run, he's right. But Keynes also said, in the long run, we're all dead. So I believe for the time being, in the foreseeable future, China's general economy is robust, and China's property market is also under control, although the price has gone up a lot. But comparatively, think about the price increase. It's all in the big cities, in the tier 1 or tier 2 cities. And think about the population movement, the immigration from urban or small cities, towns, to the big cities. So it's really everything's driven up by the fundamentals, by the demand. It's not only by the speculation. So
I'm afraid you have been a little bit too selective in using the facts and the figures to give a rosy picture. What about the ghost cities in the third-tier cities? What about the local debts for those who have long enjoyed the land revenue? Now, this tie has been severed by the policy curbs.
Yes, if we're talking about China's property market, we need to divide China's property market into several markets. For those ghost towns, small town and or tier 4 cities, forget about it. I don't think they have a future for property market. I believe in the tier 1, tier 2, and some of the tier 3 cities close to the tier 2 or tier 1 cities. For those cities, and the immigration, the urbanization, it's not done yet. It's still in the middle of it. So the demand will also, it will be there for some time.
But
so
I'm
that's
afraid
the
you
reason
deliver very conflicting signals about the prospects of the local property market. We have the ghost towns, ghost cities, and young people would always turn to the first and second tier cities for opportunities, all right?
Yes.
No one would prefer to live in the backward, underdeveloped ghost cities.
Right.
What about the devastating issue of local debts? How can the debts be covered and repaid?
Well, some of the debts, local debts, it will never be recovered.
And the local debts are the most likely catalyst for avalanche disasters of the financial industry, right?
Well, if we put everything in one pool, and the smaller cities, the ghost cities, they are really not that bad, within China, the whole picture. If we go to the U.S., you will see many, many more ghost towns than ghost cities. We go a lot of cities, and the people are moving out, and there is only one street, one gas station there. So, but in China, even we have some ghost cities, and even those ghost cities, they are not really ghosts forever. So in China, I'm still optimistic with the market, especially with the Tier 1, Tier 2, and some of the Tier 3 cities. But Tier 4 cities, I do not believe they're going to have a bright future, and the price is not going to go up continuously. So
they
that's
won't
my
go up,
opinion.
therefore the debts will go up, and the return of the investment would be a luxury.
You're right, and some of the investors, if you are investing into the fourth-tier cities, probably you're not going to get back your investment. And if government, some of the government debt, the government may not, local government may not be able to repay the debt, but we have the central government, we have the provincial government. They are going to help those local government to pay their debt.
Vincent gave us a rosy picture, or a relatively, or cautiously optimistic picture about the Chinese economic performance. However, let's look at this. China is getting old before it gets rich, and the aging population and diminishing demographic dividend, meaning our labor force is getting older, unlike in India, where labor dividends would obviously be their national competitive edge in catching up quickly with the Chinese economic size. Having said this, what do you think of the impact the aging population would deliver to the Chinese real estate sector?
Yes, I think to follow on what Vincent said, I have 2 points we need to pay serious notice on that. One is, I think the aging society is coming. Secondly, I think the man purchasing force and the man workforce, actually the generation also is changing. So you have to add in these 2 elements. One, I think the aging society. From now the calculation on the 2020, we're going to have 225 million of the aging people, and it's taking like 17.8% of the whole population. Then if you're talking about 2026, we will have close to 25% of the aging people in the whole society. To come to this kind of society, we must notice when the China entering the aging society, the purchasing power to the new construction housing we quickly going down. This I think is for sure is a trend, But they need a lot of so-called old age care center and this and that. And this one actually China has a lot of way behind. We need to really pay a notice of all this kind. So I believe there's a lot of property who is servicing on the rental market going to turn into the old care center, old care property, this and that. But doesn't means we need to build a lot of new buildings.
Right. He's suggesting, Martin is suggesting that some of the ghost cities might be transformed into nursing homes in the city proper or in the township places. So do you think this is a good suggestion?
Well, I think it definitely is one of the options, but I still believe the aging society, we're still far away from there. So we need to be careful in doing all the calculations overall for the 1.3 billion people, and the percentage may going up. But think about, where are the aging people? If you go to the ghost towns, the small towns, the villages, they are there. They are not in Beijing or Shanghai or Shenzhen, Guangzhou. The big cities with immigration, with the urbanization, it's all young people moving to the big cities. So for the big cities, if we really have the numbers, I believe, the big cities, it's not becoming aging. It's probably stable, because we have more young people moving into the big cities. So China is really a huge, big country. We need to look at China very, very carefully. So I'm still optimistic.
I have a debate here. Yes, I fully agree. We are now at 55% urbanization rate. We're going to reach 75% urbanization rate. So it still have 20% to 25%
margin
way to go. Definitely, they need a lot of housing when the people move into the city. Okay, but we must look at it. The people moving to the city doesn't mean they must buy a property. They must own a property. Recently, I noticed there's something like the young people, when they move into the city to work, for example, there's a lot of internet and internet plus. technology companies, young people, they're working in Beijing, Shanghai. They maybe work actually at a lot of cities. They move many cities, but they have 1 unit or 2 units in their home base city. Their home base city maybe is a 2nd-tier city, maybe it's 1.5 tier, maybe it's 3rd-tier city. And this city is actually now is developed better and better. So does it mean these young people, they must buy a unit in this 1st-tier or 2nd-tier city? I noticed their rationale is starting to change. They would rather they can rent a good apartment, but this apartment must give a realistic price, a reasonable price to them. But they need to have a good service. They need to have maybe very interesting, the food and all the kind of service there. But they might not really have the rationale must to buy a unit. So
I think you're right, but
yeah.
If they have a choice to buy or to rent, if they have the affordability, and they are going to buy. So.
Yeah, yeah, and their parents has already bought quite a few units for them. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. The last question, and I'd like to have a short answer from both of you. Shenzhen pioneered the sale of state land use rights with the first rights public auction 30 years ago in December 1987. 10 years later, in 1998, the central government ended the welfare housing system and initiated a marketization stage in housing reform. How do you view China's housing reform over the past 3 decades in general, very quickly?
I think it's very successful, shortly.
Very successful.
And the housing reform in the past 30 years, think about where we are living now.
Yeah.
We're living in a much better house or an apartment for most of Chinese citizens, urban citizens. So, and look at the buildings, look at the street, it's all contributed from the development, from the developers as well. So,
there are 2 points. One, I think we have a license myth during the past 30 years. We did not really incubate a very good rental market, so-called rental service market. So I think now the policy is really to promote the China to really make up the myth license. Secondly, I think we need to quickly build up the race market, which is have a multi-layer capital market to support the long-term holding rental market.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
With that, we come to the end of this interesting debate about the housing market and the renting housing market in China, particularly following the policy speech of Mr. Xi Jinping, who emphasizes that the housing is used for living in, not for speculation. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.